Hello everybody, I'm just going to give another quick demonstration of how to create a plugin using the BI Mobile Application Designer plugin framework. It's just a repeat of the demonstration I gave during the kickoff of the hackathon. So here we go. So it basically starts the same as before. Just create a new mobile app. Pick tablet. I'm going to use the same sample data. Give my mobile app a name. And then, as before, download the plugin. So I'm just going to call this my plugin. I'm going to pick some data. I'm going to use day of the week and number of orders. And this time I'm going to download it as CSV files. Download the plugin, unzip it, download it into this BIMAD Plugin 5 folder. So I'm going to open that in my text editor. So before we go through the file, I'll in the meantime download the or I'll initialize my application again just as before. This time I'm on behind the firewall, so I have to use a proxy. So while that's running, let's look at the file. So a few changes have been made to the file. You can see now that before, when we were using an external framework, we had to verify that the framework was loaded. That was done in the render function. Now you can do that in the definition right here. So you provide an isLoaded function, and that's what's going to be used to verify that your object that's being created by your external library is present in the global window scope. So I'm going to uncomment this because I am actually going to use d3.js. So this is what you would have to do to get d3.js loaded and then verify it is loaded before the plugin starts. I'm not going to use CSS. I'm going to comment this back out. And then this is your render functions. This is the same. So let's verify it's still running. So I'm going to remove all this because I'm going to obviously create my own one. So we're going to start with creating the width and the height. And I'm just going to hard code it for now. Obviously you should not do that. Then I'm going to create a Y scale. I'm going to create a bar chart, so I need a height kind of definition, so I'm going to create a Y scale for that. It's just a linear scale, and it's going to have a range of 0 to the height of my chart. Now I'm going to load the data, so I'm going to call my data set. And remember, it comes in as a CSV, so I'm going to use the CSV parser that comes with d3.js. I'm going to parse my data. And then now I can set my domain on my scale now that I have the data. So, and the domain I'm going to hard code it as well here because it's just easier. Otherwise I would have to get the min value, the max value from the data. That's how you would normally do it, but I'll do it like this. And I am now ready to create my SVG that will contain my chart. And I'll give it a width that I defined up there. And then I'll change the height to be the height that we defined earlier. Okay, let's save this. Let's see if it's done loading. It is now done loading. So let's run it to make sure that we didn't make any mistakes. And Obviously you can't see anything because the only thing we added is an empty SVG, so let's just verify that at least that SVG is there. And it doesn't look to be there, so let's see if there's any errors. And yes, there is an error, so let's fix the error. So there's a dot somewhere that shouldn't be there on line 42, which is here. And obviously this dot should not be there. Okay, no errors now, so hopefully the SVG is now rendered. And it's still not rendered because I provided, you need to add it to the container element, which is the element that is coming into your render function and in your refresh function. And that's the element to which you should attach your SVG. And now you can see my SVG is there with the proper width and height as defined in my JavaScript. Alright, so now the interesting part, let's add some bars to it. So we will, to the SVG, we are going to select all the G's, and then we are going to add our data to this. And then for each data set we will add a G, which is a kind of a grouping element in SVG. And now when we look at the SVG, let's get rid of the console, we should see a group for each element in my data set, which is 7, so I have 7 group elements. Okay, so that all looks good. Now we're going to add an actual bar to our plugin. And the bar is a rectangle, so we're just going to append a rectangle. And you will have a height, and the height is obviously that should be data driven because it's the data that's going to determine the height of our bar chart. So we're gonna cast it using our scaling function. So we're gonna scale up our from D. We're gonna get the number of orders, which is the element we want to draw. So the height is determined by that. Our width of the bar, we're going to use the width that we defined earlier divided by the number of elements in the data set. And then let's give it a color so it stands out a bit. So that will be a fill. Let's make it Oracle red. And then we also need an X attribute, so we can see the different bar charts next to each other on the X axis. So this is again a function of the data, specifically of the number of elements in our data set, so we need I here. So it's going to be again the width divided by the data set length, and then time is the element that is currently being processed. So that will move our bar chart. We'll put all our bar charts one next to the other. And let's make them a little bit smaller so we get some separation. Let's make sure we close all the brackets. Okay, let's save this and see what we got. I don't see any bars, so something's wrong. So the G's are definitely there. There is a rectangle. It does have a width, but it doesn't seem to have a height. And I don't see an error. So So let's debug that. Let's figure out what's wrong. Okay, so obviously I have to return from the function that value. Same here probably. Let's save again. Alright, so at least we have a bar. Let's again look at it and check why it is not working. So there's something wrong with the x value, so it's not a number. So let's look at our x value, and it's because I can't spell. There we go. Huzzah! Alright, so now we have a bar chart. You can see clearly it's upside down. This is typical in SVG. The 0, 0 coordinate is actually right here, top left corner. And so we have to kind of reverse our chart. So the way you do that is first you reverse the range. And then instead of just plotting the number of orders using the y, you actually subtract that from the height. And then you also need to specify a y attribute. And that y attribute is again a function of the number of orders casted using the scale. Return. Let's see what this gives us. That looks better. So now it's reversed. You can also see there's not much separation between the different bar charts. That's because the numbers that we're using are very close together. So we can change that a little bit by playing a little bit with the domain. So let's just go from 200 to 300 because all our numbers are between 2 and 300. Now as you can see there's a bit more separation. So this is just your bog standard bar chart, but obviously we want to make it a little bit more interesting. So let's add, first of all, let's add some numbers so that people can actually see what this represents. Again, to the bar. This time we're going to append some text. And this text needs to be located in the same position. So we're just going to copy the x and y coordinates. And we want the text to be white so it stands out. So that's the fill color. It's going to be white. And then let's also remove the text shadow. So the text again is going to be a function of the data. So it's going to return this number of orders. Save it. There we go. Alright, so you can see that as before, they kind of are on the top of the bar chart. So let's move them a little bit so they are in the bar chart. Let's make them white again because we know they're there now. And then we can move them by using dx. Here's one em. And then duplicate that for dy. Get rid of. There we go. So it's now moved into the bar chart, so it looks a little bit more interesting. Let's try something else. Let's say we want to rotate the text, so that would be a transform. And that would be a rotation. So we want to rotate it 90 degrees or 90 degrees, and then we need to specify the x and the y point over which it is going to rotate. Okay, so for that we're going to need data. So again, this is going to be using the data function. And it's going to have to return this. And let's replace the x with an actual value, and then we'll do the same with y. So we probably want to rotate it over the same point as this, so we're just going to copy this. And the same with Y. Let's use the same position. Okay. Let's see what happens if we run this. Oh, an error. Okay, some token on missing. There's definitely one missing here. See if that helped. Okay, so it is working, but it is not rotated. So let's see what's wrong with the rotation. So the problem is it's not rotation, it's rotate. Okay, so now the text disappeared because it's probably out of sight now. Let's move these. Okay, so the text is there, so we just have to place it correctly. So the first thing, I'm going to make it bigger to make it more interesting. So let's change the font size to be, let's say 70 pixels. And then let's move the text so it's back on the bars. Okay, so that looks better. Let's move it down a bit more. And a little bit more. Okay, and then let's move it a little bit less to the left. Okay, that looks nice. Nicely placed in the middle, and some interesting numbers there. And then let's add some animation. So for example, let's say we start the text from invisible. So that would be opacity of 0. And then we are going to transition it and then we're going to transition it into an opacity of 1. And let's add a delay, or a duration of, let's say, 1500 milliseconds, so we can actually see this appearing slowly. There we go. Maybe we could also animate the actual bars. So let's make them grow. So we're going to do a transition, and we're going to end with a height of this. And have them start with a height of 0. Let's add a duration of, again, 1500 milliseconds. And then let's delay this for that same amount of time. So this will come through after the first animation is finished. So let's see what happens here. Oh, sorry, I misspelled transition. Transition. There we go. So the bar charts are growing, and then the numbers appear afterwards. You can see that it's growing from the top, which is probably, let me refresh, which is probably not what you want. You want it to grow from the bottom. This is because of the way we have to draw the bar charts. So let's make a change to the code so it actually grows from the bottom, because it's probably nicer. So the way to kind of fake that is basically to also animate Y. So you want to end up with this. So let's put that here. But then you want it to start at 0, just like the height. Or actually you want to start it at height, which is the bottom of the chart, and then you want it to animate slowly upwards. So let's see what this gives us. There we go. Perfect. And then all that's left to do is to deploy So I'm going to kill the server, and then just from that folder just run grunt deploy. Use BIMAD welcome 1, and that's it. It's now deployed to the server. So let's double check it is actually working. So let's insert it into this into a new page and create a new blank page. Plugin, look for my plugin, which was called Mark plugin, and you can see these are the fields that it needs. So let's drag day of the week in there, and then my number of orders. And then you can see it actually working, but when you preview it, and there you have it, your first plugin.